Well, welcome to Whole Bible Study with your host, me, Inoue. Well, we've been walking together through the heart of the Torah, and so far, the story has taken us from the breathtaking moments at Sinai to the slow unfolding of Israel's covenantal life in the wilderness. Exodus left us at the foot of Sinai, with the tabernacle carefully constructed as the dwelling place for God's presence. Leviticus has shifted our focus away from the narrative drama and into the rhythms of holiness. How Israel is called to live in order to draw near to the divine. In earlier chapters, we explored the sacramental systems, burnt offerings, grain offerings, peace offerings, and the ways priests mediated between the people and God. Then we saw laws about purity, what makes one clean or unclean, not in terms of morality, but in the relation to ritual life and access to the sanctuary. These distinctions served as boundaries to safeguard the sacred space of the tabernacle. Now we turn to a particularly intimate and earthy set of laws. What happens after childbirth, and how the community managed conditions that we might describe as skin diseases or even fungal infections. These chapters may seem strange to the modern ears, but they reveal an ancient concern with life, death, and the fragile boundary between what brings blessing and what threatens disorder. So now for the live reading of Leviticus chapters 12 and 13, and we'll read from the Inoue version for readability. Chapter 12. The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, a woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is unclean during her monthly period. On the 8th day, the boy is to be circumcised. Then the woman must wait 33 days to be purified from her bleeding. She must not touch anything sacred or go into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are over. If she gives birth to a daughter for 2 weeks, the woman will be unclean as during her period. Then she must wait 66 days to be purified from her bleeding. When the days of her purification for her son or her daughter are over, she is to bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for the burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a dove or a sin offering. He shall offer them before the Lord to make atonement for her, and then she will be ceremonially clean from her flow of blood. These are the regulations for the woman who gives birth to a boy or a girl. If she cannot afford a lamb, she is to bring 2 doves or 2 pigeons, one for the burnt offering and the other for the sin offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for her, and she will be clean." Chapter 13. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when anyone has a swelling or a rash or a bright spot on his skin that may become an infectious skin disease, he must be brought to Aaron, the priest, or one of his sons who is a priest. The priest is to examine the sore on his skin, and if the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears to be more than a skin deep, it is an infectious skin disease. Then the priest examines him, when the priest examines him, he shall pronounce him ceremonially unclean. If the spot on his skin is white, but does not appear to be more than skin deep, and the hair in it has not turned white, the priest is to put the infected person in isolation for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine him, and if he sees that the sore is unchanged and has not spread in the skin, he is to keep him in isolation for another 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine him again, and if the sore has faded and has not spread in the skin, the priest can pronounce him clean. It is only a rash. The man must wash his clothes, and he will be clean. But if the rash does spread in his skin after he has shown himself to the priest to be pronounced clean, he must appear before the priest again. The priest is to examine him, and if the rash has spread in the skin, he he shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infectious disease. When anyone has an infectious skin disease, he must be brought to the priest. The priest is to examine him, and if there is a white swelling in the skin that has turned the hair white, and if there is raw flesh in the swelling, it is a chronic skin disease, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He is not to put him in isolation because he is already unclean. If the disease breaks out all over his skin, and so far as the priest can see, it covers all the skin of the infected person from head to foot, the priest is to examine him, and if the disease has covered his whole body, he shall pronounce that person clean. Since it has all turned white, he is clean. But whenever raw flesh appears on him, he will be unclean. When the priest sees the raw flesh, he shall pronounce him unclean. The raw flesh is unclean. He has an infectious disease. Should the raw flesh change and turn white, he must go to the priest. The priest is to examine him, and if the sores have turned white, the priest shall pronounce the infected person clean. Then he will be clean. When someone has a boil on his skin, it heals, and the place where the boil was, a white swelling or reddish white spot appears. He must present himself to the priest, and the priest is to examine it, and if it appears to be more than skin deep, and the hair in it has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infectious skin disease that has broken out where the boil was. But if when the priest examines it, there is no white hair in it, and it is not more than skin deep and has faded, then the priest is to put him in isolation for 7 days. If it is spreading in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is infectious. But if the spot is unchanged and has not spread, it is only a scar from the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. When someone has a burn on his skin and is reddish white, or white spot appears in the raw flesh of the burn, the priest is to examine the spot, and if the hair in it has turned white and it appears to be more than skin deep, it is an infectious disease. That has broken out in the burn. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infectious disease. But if the priest examines it and there is no white hair in the spot, and if it is not more than skin deep, it has faded, then the priest is to put him in isolation for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine him, and if it is spreading in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is infectious skin disease. If, however, the spot is unchanged and has not spread in the skin but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scar from the burn. If a man or a woman has a sore on the head or the chin, the priest is to examine the sore, and if it appears to be more than skin deep, and the hair in it is yellow and thin, the priest shall pronounce the person unclean. It is an itch, an infectious disease of the head or chin. But if, when the priest examines this kind of sore, it does not seem to be more than skin deep, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest is to put the infected person in isolation for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine the sore, and if the itch has not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, and it does not appear to be more than skin deep, he must be shaved except for the diseased area. The priest is to keep him in isolation for another 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine the itch, and if it has not spread in the skin and appears to be no more than skin deep, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. He must wash his clothes, and he will be clean. But if the itch does spread in the skin after he is pronounced clean, the priest is to examine him, and if the itch has spread to the skin, the priest does not need to look for yellow hair. The person is unclean. If, however, it is, in his judgment, it is unchanged and black hair has grown in it, the itch is healed. He is clean. The priest shall pronounce him clean. When a man or a woman has white spots on the skin, the priest is to examine them, and if the spots are dull white, it is harmless. It is a harmless rash that has broken out on the skin. That person is clean. When a man has lost his hair and is bald, he is clean. If he has lost his hair from the front of the scalp and has a bald forehead, he is clean. But if he has a reddish white sore on his bald head or forehead, it is an infectious disease breaking out on his head or forehead. The priest is to examine him, and if the swollen sore has on his head or forehead is reddish white, like an infectious skin disease, the man is diseased and unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean because of the sore on his head. The person with such an infectious disease must wear torn clothes, let his hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of his face, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." As long as he has the infection, he remains unclean. He must live alone. He must live outside the camp. If any clothing is contaminated with mildew, or any wood, woolen, or linen clothing, any woven or knitted material of linen or wool, any leather, or anything made of leather, and if the contamination in the clothing or leather or woven or knitted material or any leather article is greenish or reddish, it is a spreading mildew and must be shown to the priest. The priest is to examine the mildew and isolate the affected article for 7 days. On the seventh day, he is to examine it, and if the mildew has spread in the clothing or in the woven or knitted material or the leather, wherever its use is, it is a destructive mildew. The article is unclean. He must burn it up. He must burn up the clothing or the woven or knitted material of wool or linen or any leather article that has the contamination in it. Because the mildew is destructive, the article must be burned up. But if, when the priest examines it, the mildew has not spread in the clothing or the woven or the knitted material or the leather article, he shall order that the contaminated article be washed. Then he is to isolate it for another 7 days after the affected article has been washed, and the priest is to examine it. And if the mildew has not changed its appearance, even though it is not spread, it is unclean. Burn it with fire, whether the mildew has affected one side or the other. If, when the priest examines it, the mildew has faded after the article has been washed, he is to tear the contaminated part out of the clothing or the leather or the woven knitted material. But if it reappears in the clothing or in the woven knitted material or in the leather article, it is spreading, and whatever has the mildew must be burned with fire. The clothing or the woven or knitted material or any leather article that has been washed and is rid of the mildew must be washed again, and it will be clean. These are the regulations concerning contamination by mildew or wood or woolen or linen clothing, woven or knitted material, or any leather article, for pronouncing them clean or unclean. Leviticus 12 begins with laws about childbirth. When a woman gives birth, she enters a period of impurity, 40 days, if she has a son. 80 days if a daughter. This raises immediate questions. Why the longer period for a daughter? And why is childbirth treated as a source of impurity? To understand this, we need to step into the symbolic world of the priestly writers. In their view, bodily fluids, especially blood, represented liminal states. Blood gives life, but when it leaves the body, it marks vulnerability and potential disorder. Childbirth, though joyful, involved risk, pain, and the nearness of death. It was a holy threshold where the new life emerged, but where mortality lingered close. This theme connects to a larger theological idea in Leviticus. God's holiness is about ordered life. Anything that hints at death or chaos must be separated from the sacred. Holiness is not simply about moral goodness. It's about protecting the space where God's presence can dwell safely among his people. Now, childbirth then is not impure in a sinful sense, but in a ritual sense. It involves blood, fluid, and profound physical change, all of which requires distance from the sanctuary until ritual boundaries are reestablished. In the ancient Near East, childbirth was widely recognized as a spiritually powerful time. Egyptian and Mesopotamian cultures also practiced postpartum purification. What sets Israel apart is how these rituals are embedded in their covenantal relationship with God. These laws weren't just cultural, they were theological. The double time period for daughters has sparked much discussion. Some scholars believe it reflects patriarchal bias. Others argue it points to ritual symbolism. A girl carries the potential to one day bear life herself. From a priestly perspective, this heightened potential might have required an extended purification rhythm, not to devalue women, but to emphasize the sacred power of female life-giving. And there's something else important. The required offering. The woman was to bring a lamb and a bird. But if she couldn't afford that, 2 birds were enough. This detail may seem small, but it reveals something central to Leviticus. Ritual access was not restricted by wealth. Even the poorest person had a path back into the community's sacred life. Holiness was not just for the elite. The priestly system provided a framework that was strict, but also made room for inclusion. Leviticus 13 shifts the focus from birth to bodily affliction. It outlines how the priests were to examine and manage a condition called tzara. This word is often translated as leprosy, but it doesn't refer to Hansen's disease. Rather, tzara describes a broad category of visible changes: flaky or scaly skin, patches of discoloration, swelling, or even the mildew in clothing. The role of the priest here is not to heal, but to diagnose. They assess whether someone has tahor, meaning ritually clean, or tameh, meaning ritually unclean. These labels didn't imply sinfulness. Instead, they determined whether someone could safely interact with the sacred space of the tabernacle. This is crucial in Leviticus. Impurity is not moral failure. It's a ritual misalignment. The presence of disorder, whether blood disease or mold, requires separation until order is restored. That's why these chapters feel so detailed. They're describing a system that's trying to hold sacred space open in a world full of decay. The priestly guidelines are meticulous. If the hair in the sword turns white, if the skin is deeper than the surface, if it spreads over time, each of these signs helps determine whether someone must isolate or return. There's a sense of procedural care here, not fear or disgust. The text is concerned with stability, not shame. Anthropologists note that in ancient cultures without germ theory, physical irregularities were seen as signs of deeper danger. Ancient Israel's system responded to this through ritual categories. It offered structure in the face of the unknown. Priests were the community-trained observers. Religious, yes, but also practical. And tzara didn't stop the people. The text also extends the diagnosis to garments, leather, cloth, anything that could show a spreading of discoloration. Later in Leviticus 14, this even applies to houses. Mold and rot weren't just ugly or smelly, they were threats to life and order. The Holiness Code extended into the very architecture of daily living. Archaeology backs this up. homes built in stone and mud brick in the Iron Age, Israel were vulnerable to moisture and decay. These laws reflected a people deeply rooted in the land and its challenges. They weren't abstract. They were grounded in real life. Scholars like George Nicholsberg and Lauren Struckenbruck argue that these regulations reflected Israel's settled agrarian period and were likely edited during or after the exile. That timeline fits. In exile without temple or monarchy, the priestly authors emphasized holiness in ordinary life, in birth, in disease, walls, fabrics. These laws gave Israel a way to remain distinct and faithful in a world where their identity was under constant pressure. The language of the text carries its own theological weight. The word tzara comes from the root meaning to strike or to afflict, implying that a condition marked a kind of disruption. The term tama'e means ritually unfit or out of bounds, while tahor means in proper order or fit for sanctuary use. Again, these aren't moral judgments. They're about being in right condition to approach God's holiness. And that really is the deeper logic of Leviticus. God desires to dwell among the people, but that presence must be protected. The priestly system builds a sacred architecture, a kind of spiritual scaffolding to keep God near without harm. That structure matters to the whole biblical story. Holiness in the Old Testament isn't just a divine quality. It's a way of life. It's how a community reflects the character of God. It reaches into justice, worship, compassion, and yes, even bodily health. The priesthood acted as mediators of this vision, teaching the people how to live in the way that made space for God. Many scholars group Leviticus 12 and 13 into the priestly source, often labeled P. These chapters were likely compiled by priestly editors who drew on older traditions, shaped by centuries of life in the land and in exile. The laws read here reflect that slow shaping, a theology of holiness that is historical, symbolic, and deeply personal. Over time, Jewish interpretation added layers of meaning. For example, in Numbers 12, Miriam is afflicted with tzara after speaking against Moses. Later, rabbinic teaching connects tzara with the sin of lashon hara, or lashon hara, evil speech or slander. But this is a later interpretation. In Leviticus 13 itself, there is no moral fault assigned. The text is not punitive. It's administrative and protective. To summarize, Leviticus 12 and 13 address the raw realities of birth, bodily change, and decay. They're not moralistic, they're ritualistic. Systems built to protect sacred space and offer paths back into the presence of God. These laws reveal a deep concern for order in the world that constantly leans towards chaos. And they show that holiness isn't just about worship. It's about how we live and how we care for one another and how we honor the rhythms of life. Now, thank you for joining me in this journey through Leviticus 12 and 13. And by digging into the linguistic context, we see how these chapters gave ancient Israel a framework for making sense of vulnerability and maintaining sacred order. If something in this teaching struck you, or if you had an insight that I didn't cover, please like and drop a note, a comment. I'd love to hear how the text speaks to you or something you've learned. May you be blessed with the wisdom to recognize sacred rhythms in your own life, and the courage to face vulnerability with grace, knowing that even in disorder, God is near. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you in the next chapter soon.